Listen, Dane, all I'm saying is that I would respectfully request you refer to me as Sir David for the rest of the night.
S-I-R or S-E-R?
S-I-R. Why would I? What's S-E-R?
I think S-E-R is if you're going the night route.
No, S-I-R that's the night one.
I don't think so. I think it's S-E-R. You know how that old-timey English always spelled shit wrong?
Like vitamin shoppy?
Yeah, or like center.
With an E at the end?
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, well, either way, the one that they put the sword on either side of you. Because I have been knighted. At medieval times, I was a blue member of the blue team of the blue persons. We almost had him until the joust, and then he was foisted off his own petard. And unfortunately, the Green Knight, the Slytherin, won. I don't even know that.
Mixing up your books and metaphors.
I think that the shark should have eaten Harry at the end and not Voldemort.
I don't know what any of that means, but I'm going with it.
Expelliarmus. Anywho, you want to get into it, Dane? Let's get into it.
We should.
All right, so we've got a meme to destruct today. And the meme is medieval times was better than current day.
Apparently.
Well, they do give you like a leg of chicken and like the dragon's nails, fucking soup. And then you get as many refills of your liter of mead, which is just Coca-Cola. So you get diabetes that they definitely had back in medieval times. We'll get into it. We'll get into medieval times. It was great.
And the girls wear those things that push the stuff
corsets,
up.
Yeah. Squeezes their innards all over the place. But as long as their tits look good. Anyway. All right, so for the culture corner, gays can't get no love from Provorov. Am I saying that right?
And
Provorov?
Close enough for government work.
Okay.
Provorov.
Can't get no love from Provorov.
Correct.
That's what I wanted to do.
That's what you
All right, here we go. After I fudged that one up, you want to talk about somebody else fudging some shit? Epstein didn't kill himself. Fudged the VIDI numbers.
You mean to tell me the COVID numbers didn't inflate themselves?
Unless they had a cock pump, I don't think so. We've all been there, guys. You tell her you're a solid 7. Maybe you're a mediocre 5. Anyway, moving on to the main topic. Sam Harris has a serious case of TDS. Not to be confused with TBS, which is a wonderful broadcasting station. But TDS is something that we've seen too many times on this podcast, unfortunately.
And Sam Harris himself is a repeat offender. So,
what's that old saying? The once is an accident, twice is a habit, or
once is an accident, twice is a trend, 3 times is a habit.
That's the one I was looking for. All right. After all that bullshit, you want to jump into this?
Let's do it. Welcome to Weapons of Immune Destruction Podcast, episode 130, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/130. You can find the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Immune Destruction. You can get the videos on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey. Even though we are going to talk about the no-no topic in this episode as well. As you recall from last week's episode, we decided we're going to stay on YouTube no matter what we talk about. And we'll just blank out the things that would probably get us a ban. And if you want to see the full, uncut, uncensored episode, if you're a video consumer, go over to Rumble or Odyssey, where, again, as we like to say, they allow us to talk like adults.
We might be shirtless over there, too, by the way.
David might be. You can also link up with us on our other social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, that's a members-only Facebook page, so you got to donate $5 a month. Go over to the website to figure out how to do that.
You get a cool jacket too.
No, you don't. But we are also on Twitter. We are also on Float, which I believe is a competitor of Facebook. And we're on, what was that one, Tribal that we did an episode on still, because Nameless Faceless Guy is hell-bent on being over there, thinking that those people can be reasoned with.
Changing the hearts and minds.
You know what? God bless him. If the man's got time for it and it doesn't cost us money.
Taking on the Iraq and Afghanistan war himself.
So with that being said, let's jump right into it, David. Today's meme to be destroyed. Thank you, Nameless Faceless commenter over on Twitter who sent this to us. We have a tweet from a Twitter account.
By the way, that wasn't a Nameless Faceless commenter.
It's not the same Nameless Faceless person. If you want your name and face said on the show,
or just your name,
the tweet given to us,
we can delineate between the two.
We're more than happy to do that, but not everybody does. So anyway, a tweet from a Twitter account called No Context Brits, and boy, if that isn't an apropos name, because this meme needs a lot of context, or else it looks like the facile, bullshit that it is. Anyway, there's a picture of medieval serfs planting their fields, and the tweet says,
They
quote,
serfed in medieval times?
Yeah, they were totally gnarly, bro. The tweet says, and I quote, medieval peasants worked only about 150 days in a year. The church believed it was important to keep them happy with frequent, mandatory holidays. You have less holidays than a medieval peasant.
They probably spent most of their day off on YouTube on their phone.
Probably. That's what I would have done with my days off.
I
try not to do that now. I try to read, self, improve on a regular basis.
The Secret.
But,
you read The Secret
sometimes the tubes just draw me in.
Yeah. You know what I do with my phone?
What?
Back in medieval times?
Not die of Black Death.
I'd check out how many people died that day of Black Death, and I'd just be like, well, I'm going to move to another township real quick. And then right before I do that, I go incognito and make sure I get one last one out of the way. Anywho.
So we've seen iterations of this sort of commentary all over the place, and it's always coming from lefty pages. I don't know from this, just the name of the Twitter, No Context Brits, I don't know if they're a lefty page or not, but I've seen memes similar to this shared on other repeat offenders like the other 98%, Occupy Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. And the obvious implication here is your life is worse off than a medieval peasant because they had 150 days off, and capitalism is this terrible thing that has you enslaved to consumerism such that you get no days off a year and you're miserable and your life sucks, and wouldn't it be great if only you were working for a feudal lord? That's the implication.
Well, the lefties, I mean, are they aware that the Obamacare was a little lax back then? The healthcare practices back then, very medieval, shall we say?
Yeah, bloodletting and leeches were
was that covered under your PPO,
treatments.
Or did you have to go over to your what was your deductible back then? Was it just the first part of your leg and then the second part of your leg covered the first part of your leg, or was it your owner?
Yeah, God forbid you got a mild scratch that got infected, or else you were either going to die of gangrene or lose a limb.
Like that, like nowadays you scratch your toe, your mom freaks out and tells you to put fucking Neosporin on it, and then like whatever antibacterial salve or
that
lotion.
Would be Neosporin.
Well, I mean, you clean it first. You put the peroxide on it, and then you hit it with the Neosporin.
Yeah,
I might have got a little fakakta. Might have got a little out of order. Want to bear with me for a second? Trying to work through this thing live and in living color. But my whole point being is like literally, if you broke your ankle, you were super screwed back then.
Yeah.
So I should say, working 150 days. By the way, all those work days. We're not like, oh, I went to the desk and I sent some emails and I checked my emails and then I texted Tina what she wants to do with this group project that we're working on. Then I went to the coffee and I had a cup of coffee and I talked about the game last night and how super depressed I was. And then I went back and I did a couple of emails, then I took about a 30-minute shit and got paid for it. And then I had lunch. And then my tummy was a little upset around 3 o'clock. Then I went home.
It's a nice play. Nice day in the life of David.
I don't live that life. Don't hit me with that life.
But, first of all, just on the surface level, the dipshittery flowing through the point that's trying to be made here is almost too much to bear, right? The idea that medieval peasants had 150 days off a year is just patently absurd because, as you know, before about the 1820s or 30s, when global poverty started falling off a cliff, human beings, this normal state of affairs from the Stone Age all the way up to medieval times and shortly thereafter, people were barely living above subsistence. So what 150 days off means is that you're not going to work for your feudal lord or not going off to be marching into the fields to get hacksawed by whatever, king's war that they decided they wanted for that year. Your 150 days off is being home and planting your own food and making your own clothes because you're just like this far above subsistence. So it's not like you're sitting on your ass just chilling like a villain, 150 days out of a year. But let's set all of that aside for a second and just grant the surface level objection and say, aren't you missing a massive blind spot in the fact that even if you are technically poor in the United States, I forget what the poverty line is, it's something like $15,000 or $12,000 a year. There are people that are making that much money a year that are living in a house with air conditioning, a refrigerator, they have a cell phone, they can watch at least some TV if they don't have all the streaming services, all of the trappings of modern life. You have a standard of living that the most powerful kings in Europe during the medieval times couldn't possibly fathom. And you have the unmitigated gall from all of those wonderful, almost magical gadgets that you think just came out of nowhere, but were the product of centuries of innovation post-capitalism, to say, well, capitalism is giving you a really shitty life compared to medieval serfs, and having absolutely no curiosity about the world and how all these fancy gadgets made your life so much better that, the Habsburgs themselves would be falling over themselves to trade their life for yours if they, had a crystal ball and could see it. And it's kind of like that theme of last week's meme that we were talking about. These people just have no appreciation for anything.
Well,
they just have utter entitlement through and through.
Let's suffice it to say that it was a simpler time. They had shoes made out of cow skin. They had 2 genders, and that was it. Like, they literally had to just make things work. It's super simple. Now, very complicated. Now you have to be able to text while you drive and formulate opinions that are told to you on CNN and Fox News. So
I'm glad you
how the hell do you have time to do any of that now?
I'm glad you brought up the 2 genders things because that really does juxtapose this thing. Back then, when you had real true,
I was trying to.
I know. Back then, when you had real true hardship, you didn't have time to sit down there or to sit around and think of ways to figure out how you were oppressed.
Can I put it more crass?
Yeah.
You didn't have a billion different things to put your dick in and find out whether or not you liked it or not. Or vice versa.
So, modern society just sitting around trying to figure out who's more oppressed all the time should be all you need to know to realize that meme is absolute
And by the way,
bullshit.
it took dedication to keep your line going back then. You know how often they bathed? Probably how often they had a day off. You're talking 150 days out of the year. There's 350 days. They might have bathed.
I bet they bathed less than that.
If a chick has worked all day or a dude has worked all day, you really want to smell that? No, he's got to get in the shower. He's got to clean up. And if I see one follicle on your genitalia, I'm going to have you shave it off. That's how prim and prissy we are nowadays. Think about, they had to commit back then to make a human. Yeah. Oh, and then guess what? When they're impoverished, they had to feed said human until it reached, or you just have a bunch of them and see which ones survive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're worried about child labor? Every kid they popped out at the second they could walk needed to be out in the field working to be able to pull their own weight and contribute to the family so that they all didn't starve to death.
Who has diapers? Just shit in the field. It's free fertilizer. Shut up. Get out there.
Anyway, if you were one of the people, and again, self-selected group that follows and watches this podcast are not the people that would be drawn in by a brain-dead meme like that. But if you were, stop it. Just stop it. And if you have friends and family, don't tell them to stop it and send them over to Weapons of Meme Destruction to destroy all their memes that are stupid.
Because after all, we're a family broadcast.
That's right. So moving on to the culture corner and kind of parlaying on David's little, multiple gender thing and all that kind of stuff and finding oppression where it's not. Apparently, it is highly oppressive for a professional athlete in any sport, in this case, the NHL, hockey, for any athlete to have his opinions that are not sufficiently down with the prevailing narrative. And what we're referring to is this week, a defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers named Ivan Provorov did not want to participate in, the pregame skate around or the pregame warm up, where it was agreed between the teams that they would wear pride paraphernalia, whether it be shirts or whatever the case may be, not their jerseys that they were going to wear in the game. And Provorov, who is, I believe, a Russian Orthodox Christian, said, that goes against my faith. I'm not going to do it. I think his exact words were something along the lines of, I'm not saying anything bad about anybody else. You can have your lifestyle and you can do whatever you want. I'm not saying bad about anybody. I'm just saying for me and mine, I'm not going to do that. And for that, he was the world's worst person for about a 72-hour news cycle.
You know what's weird is if you forced somebody of a different religion to try to wear somebody else's religious symbol, they would refuse it too, and nobody would shit their pants over it. Yeah. This is sexuality, and it's not, it has no bearing in whether or not a hockey game is played. So why does everything have to be the over prevailing narrative? Like, why does it have to infiltrate every aspect of our entire lives? Like, when's the last time a hockey player killed a gay guy?
Never seen it.
He might have given him a heavy check on the ice unwittingly, not knowing that he was gay, just playing the game. But what I'm saying is, like, it has no business in hockey. It has no business in all these other things that they're just forcing it down our throats. And that's where it really becomes, you lose face by doing that. But I don't think, and hear me out, I don't think the gay rights movement is behind this at all. I think that it's more, what we see, what is it called on social media? Virtue signaling from major corporations to say, hey, we're one of you. We're one of you. So if we don't put up our gay prize, if we don't turn our Nike sign gay with the rainbow flag, if we don't turn our Adidas sign rainbow, then we're not members of the tribe. But I don't think that gay people would participate in anything less or would participate in anything more if they found out that they didn't wear a rainbow jersey or change their symbol to a rainbow symbol at any given time. I think they'd still buy Nike. They'd still if they're into the hockey, National Hockey League, they'd watch hockey. They would watch they wouldn't change their lives at all until that corporation committed a hate crime against their gender. Then maybe they change it. Until then.
I mean, of course. And we talked about this during and I'm not going to say the word so I don't get this segment blotted out. We're already going to lose at least one segment talking about the C word. But during the time of the C, the last 2.5, 3 years, we brought up this point often, is that the one thing that the regime cannot handle is a single nail sticking up, because what a single nail does is it provides the counter narrative. And if there is a counter narrative out there that can prove whatever they want the prevailing narrative to be true and correct and virtuous or whatever they want it to be, if there's one counter narrative out there that could destroy the prevailing narrative, then they can't have that. That's why if you have 95% compliance with anything, they will obsess ridiculously over the last 5% not following the rules or toting the line. In this case, saying the right things or putting on the right shirt. And that's what it's about. It's fundamentally about control. I think David's right. I think most of the LGBTQIA plus community probably doesn't lose much sleep over whether or not one hockey player says that, well, because of my religious belief, I choose not to wear the jersey. I think most of them are probably either not watching hockey or they're too busy. They have a lot bigger fish to fry in their lives than whether he wears a shirt or not, or they just have all kinds of other things to be concerned about other than that. I think that the ones that are pushing this are basically two camps. It's the one camp's the megalomaniacal, tyrants and wannabe tyrants that want everybody to fall in line and say whatever it is they tell them to say. And it's the legions of useful idiots who follow along with that just because they want to be a part of the in crowd and they want to be popular and they want to be looked at as having all of the right opinions, right? Those are the two camps that are pushing this, not even the group that was allegedly wronged by him not wearing a shirt. So, I mean, that's where it is. And as soon as society comes to that conclusion, that different groups are not actually as oppressed as much as the perception is the reality from the regime and their opinion molders want to tell you that it is, as soon as society comes to that conclusion, then we can stop letting these morons divide us along ridiculous lines that mean nothing. And we can look together towards who is the real problem. And it's them. It's the ones who can't let people have their own opinion and live their own life, even if they disagree with it. Those are the people that are the problem. And as soon as we all figure that out, they're going to be gone very quickly because it's a very small minority, but a very loud minority of people that are trying to force other people to have opinions that they don't approve of.
And by the way, just if you asked a member of the LGBTQ
IA plus, I think.
IA plus. Okay, I
where it
haven't learned my
stands
new
today.
vernacular. I'll do better next time. If you asked them last week, was it Alex or Alec? Who Alex Provorov or
Ivan Provorov.
Even worse.
As Russian as you can get,
he's
my
like,
guy.
as Russian as the hammer and sickle that crosses it. Anyway, if you asked them who their favorite defender in the NHL was, they'd probably ask you what the NHL was. No offense to you guys. I don't know a lot of Americans that watch hockey. It's a very small segment comparatively to the NFL and so on and so forth. And again, after he didn't wear the jersey, unless it was broadcast on national media saying that he didn't, they would have no fucking idea that he didn't wear it. So it wouldn't have even been a thing if they didn't make it a thing.
The outrage machine just gears up and
they just want it. It's like they want to cause the controversy to make another topic because they have no fucking idea how to do their jobs any other way other than just create something, a problem out of nothing, which seems to be most of our society, or at least where most of our society is paying attention to instead of the real shit that's happening. Like, I don't know, an Epstein didn't kill himself moment that happened this week.
Yeah. And I mean, just because I found it, I wanted to give Provorov the last word because he deserves it. And just preface it by saying, if this statement is just like the end of the world, a terrible thing to you, with all due disrespect, fuck off. I mean, because this is the most innocuous statement you could have possibly made about it. This is what Provorov said, and I quote, "I respect everybody, and I respect everybody's choices. My choice is to stay true to myself and my religion. That's all I'm going to say." So that's all we're going to say.
Mic drop.
Now,
On the
to-
Epstein didn't kill himself.
On to Epstein not killing himself. Now, I know for the longtime listeners, you're thinking, guys, listen, is this truly an Epstein moment? Because usually you point us to some sort of have to say, we'll never be fooled by these types of people again.
Or at the very least, they aren't considerate of the truth. That's all you need to know. Whatever they're telling you, the truth is of minimal interest.
Right.
So, with all that being said, Dane, for the main topic, to get back to that lovely old Trump Derangement Syndrome, who is most affected by it in this week's news?
We have, as we said in the outset, a repeat offender.
Oh, no.
Sam Harris.
Oh, Samuel.
Who David and I were familiar with him. We weren't like regular consumers of his content, but we were familiar with him pre-Trump, pre-COVID, yada, yada, yada. And, you know, he's like any sort of public intellectual, right? He's got hits and misses here and there. God knows we probably do.
We are all flawed.
But TDS has really, really just completely eaten away at this guy's brain, such that the points that he tries to make barely make any sense. And this week, for the second time on this podcast, and maybe he's been doing it on other places, but this is the second time we've called out Sam Harris for such things, is he's appealing to dead children to make some sort of point. If you recall, when we were talking about when he did an interview with about how evil and terrible Trump is, he said that he would literally not care if there were actual dead bodies of children found in Hunter Biden's basement. That wouldn't change his vote for Joe because Trump is just that bad. Well, now, this past week, Sam Harris said in an interview that if COVID had killed more children, there would have been no fucking patience for vaccine skeptics. And he's very quick at the end to walk it back and say, I'm not saying I wish it was worse than it was, and I'm not saying I wish more kids would have died. I'm just saying that in some alternate reality that never happened, that if more kids would have died, I would have been right. Well, I don't know about you, David, but if I just make up any sort of random bullshit that I can pull out of my ass and say, well, if ifs and buts were cherries and nuts, then I'd be right about everything all the time.
Merry Christmas.
Wouldn't that be a world an interesting world to inhabit? But yeah, that's what passes now as public intellectualism, is saying, if in some alternate reality something that didn't happen happened, then I would have been right. Jesus, Sam. Jesus.
Samuel fucking Harris. I gotta tell you, it's hard to totally digest that all in one sitting.
Yeah.
But I don't know how. I think there's a huge lack of self-awareness in this culture right now. I think there's a huge lack of individual accountability. And I think that with that, there is a fevered pitch that when you just get mad enough and you think you're a member of the tribe, whether it be liberal or conservative, that you just go out and you can say whatever the fuck you want. But unfortunately for you, Sam Harris, the guy that you voted for is called Pedo Pete by his son in his phone. The guy sniffs children's heads. The guy has been in Congress for how long? Since at least 1994, where he wrote the
70s. He was first elected in the 70s.
Right, but he wrote
the
crime reform bill back in 1994, right? Mm-hmm. Which basically made it illegal to be African American. Did he ever go to Epstein's Island?
I don't think his name has been mentioned in any of the books or anything.
Thank goodness. But the guy that's been doing little to nothing but build his own repertoire in this country. Oh, by the way, what happened on Hunter Biden's laptop? What's coming out now? That he was getting paid $49,000 a month in rent from Hunter Biden?
I don't know.
There's been a lot of kooky stuff that's happened that they accused Trump of doing. Imagine And I know we've brought it up on the podcast before. Like, imagine Donald Trump Jr. had a laptop like Hunter Biden had. Imagine the FBI raided Biden's house full of documents and not Mar-a-Lago. Imagine that. It seems as though the left just has this returning bullet that whatever they shoot to the other side always comes back and pings them right in the fucking forehead. Like, they accuse Trump of being a Russian Manchurian candidate, I believe, is basically what they said, and said the election was rigged. Well, come to find out that Hillary Clinton paid for Russian information upon Donald Trump during the campaign. And then on top of it, the next time the Republicans lose, which is the next election cycle, they say the election was rigged, and people take a protest and storm the Capitol, and they say that was the darkest day in American history. It's like, you can't have it both ways. It's either treason when you guys do it, and it's treason when they do it, or it's not treason either way. Like, you can't have a legitimate election when you win and an illegitimate election when you lose. Like, this is the dichotomy of reality that you guys are causing right now. And it's perfectly surmised, from what I've heard, in Sam Harris's rants that make no sense to anybody that's other than is it the phrase is a dyed-in-the-wool liberal? Would that be it? Or am I using that terminology wrong?
I mean, what you're saying, whether he claims to have been, I don't know.
No, I'm saying he is like fervently in that camp, and he idealizes within that camp. So he thinks that he can't say anything wrong as long as it sounds like something the camp would agree with.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So he's willing to go way out on that limb just as long as all the rest of his party agrees with him, despite the fact that it makes no sense and is based in nothing but vitriol. But they'll adhere to it and will find a way to do it. And guess what? That rift between this country goes like that each time we don't do anything about it. That's my rant.
I mean, and what he had to say, I mean, really gives up the whole game from their side, right? Because he's saying if it would have been much worse, or if the age variable would have been flipped to where it wasn't old people that were dying at really high rates and it was young people that were dying at really high rates, then he would have got what he wanted, I presume, in terms of like mandatory vaccinations and cards and tracking. And they would have got all of the things that he thought were just wise public policy if it had been worse. Well, first of all, okay, Sam, but it wasn't. And not for lack of effort, because you and your side from the very beginning were saying how bad it was going to be and who was all going to die and da-da-da-da-da. And it wasn't. It just wasn't in terms of how bad you said it was going to be and what it really was. So again, you can theorize all day long about what might have happened in some alternate reality where none of that shit happened, and yet you still tried to get away with that bullshit anyway. You've given up the whole game. But even if you hadn't done that, the real kicker to this whole thing is, so what? So what? Let's say you're right, Sam. Let's say you're right. A lot of kids died instead of older people. And that created much, much more public backlash against people that didn't want to have a medical procedure forced upon them, a jab shoved in their arm against their will, up to and including strapping them down to a table to make them do it if they didn't want to. Let's say that you think that's a good, healthy society and that's a good way to be, right? And you got it because a lot of kids died. What if you really won with that argument? Is your position more morally correct? Because at the end of the day, we're still talking about violating one of the principal rules of the Nuremberg codes is you don't force medical procedures on people. You just don't do it, because that goes to very dark places very quick. So you still have no moral legitimacy to the point you're trying to make. All you've really accomplished with your little thought experiment here is you've created an alternate reality where more people happen to agree with you than actually did, because it wasn't as bad as they said it was. So you've won nothing. You've just got more people to agree with an immoral position for what? So that you could be, I guess, at least perceived as marginally less of a piece of shit because more people agree with you. It doesn't matter if everybody in the world thinks that something immoral is correct and the right thing to do. The one person who stands against it is the only one who's right. So even if your thought experiment went exactly as you wanted, it would have accomplished nothing from your side of the ledger.
The only thing I'll take issue with is the simple fact that you think that he gained anybody on this. He's only talking to his base.
No, I'm saying if he did, even if he did.
I can't imagine.
Again, I'm steel manning his argument.
Right, you're steel manning it, but I'm just trying to bring it back to reality too. He's not talking to normal people when he's ranting like this. There's no way he can be, because normal people are starting to see people have fucking normal lives after this thing. People can move past Trump. People can keep living, but certain people are still stuck in the past and are terrified that Trump will get in office. Why? Was Apocalypse Now visited upon us when he was in office? No. The worst thing that happened was something that happened outside of his jurisdiction. Halfway through his fucking presidency, was it halfway or was it 3/4? It doesn't matter. COVID happened during his presidency. Everything up till then, the stock market was soaring. This country was looking good. We were still in a war that we'd been in for 20 years, but name another president within the last 20 years that couldn't say that. Like, things were they were operating pretty normally, but his side was just fervently going after him, finding another way, going after him, bringing his family in to go after him. It's like, at some point, you just have to stop and say, hey, this isn't working. This isn't helping anybody. You're not trying to help anybody but yourself by making this video. Self-interested people, to go back to our former topics. I don't know where it goes from here, because I'm an optimist when it comes to people. I always think that people can be turned around. But if you have this ideology that you just can't move past this one thing, i.e. Donald Trump's presidency or anything related to it, and you think that that's the bane of human existence, then you're not worth saving. No offense. If you're saying that kids need to die to make you right, but you're willing to say it, then you're beyond saving. Go out, push yourself onto that ship with the rest of your little party, and enjoy yourself.
Well, and as we gave Provorov the last word in the segment about him, because he deserved it, for the opposite side of the coin, because Sam Harris also deserves the last word here, but for reasons of infamy, we're gonna. I'm just going to let you hear one thing that he had to say, because again, he, as we said, tried to walk this whole thing back saying, well, I'm not wishing for that. I'm not hoping it would have been worse. I'm just saying.
By the way, he recorded it and then uploaded it.
He said this, quote, "In some sense, we got unlucky at how benign this was." Now, David and I said throughout COVID, and we weren't the only ones.
More people should have died.
And we weren't the only ones who said this at the time. But we said in no uncertain terms that the COVID cult is a death cult. And the reason why we said that at the time is because if you presented good news to these people who thought the sky was falling, they would be, much like the CNN host to Dr. Wen, they would be incredulous about it. They'd be like, what do you mean this isn't very risky to children? What are you trying to say? That children shouldn't get vaccinated? What do you mean that people have natural immunity, have sometimes better protection than people who have the vaccine? Are you saying that if they've had it, they shouldn't get vaccinated? What do you mean? Like, all of these things that we would think are good news right? Because it's going to be less death, and it's going to be the virus is taking on less and less, risky variants and all that kind of stuff. Maybe more transmissible, but not as deadly, right? These things that are good news if your perspective is one of, I value human life and I want less people to die. But yet when these people heard this information, they were almost angry at you for telling them this good news. In much the same way, Harris will say, I'm not wishing that this bad stuff had happened. I'm just making the point. But yet he says again, and I'm going to give him the last word. I'm going to read the quote again. In some sense, we got unlucky at how benign this was. How am I supposed to take that any other way, Sam? It is not unlucky in the slightest if the way that it actually played out saved, a handful more lives than if it was as bad as you hoped it would have been. That's not unlucky. That's the opposite of unlucky. That's lucky. We had no reason to expect that this thing would disproportionately target, older individuals such that we could identify a very clear group that was at high risk and protect that group. Remember focus protection? Remember the Great Barrington Declaration? Remember Jay Bhattacharya and Sinitra Gupta and Martin Koldorf from, podunk institutions like Stanford University, Harvard, and Oxford, who said that we know who the at-risk groups are. Let's protect them and let the rest of the world get on with itself. Remember that, Sam? We were very, very lucky to identify those groups, and had we listened to those experts, we could have protected those groups, not destroyed the global economy, not sent billions of people back into living well below the poverty line, according to the World Health Organization and the World Bank. We could have saved a lot of death and destruction to our global society if we had listened to those experts instead of the ones that you wanted to listen to, because those experts were looking at reality. They were looking at COVID as it was, not as some hypothetical that you wanted it to be to justify mandatory vaccine people. So you're going to have to miss me with this. I wasn't actually wishing for it to be worse. When you say we're unlucky that it wasn't as bad as it was, I'm going to have to call bullshit on anything you say after that sentence.
They don't call lucky?
Sam's last word.
You know what they don't call lucky?
What?
A heat-seeking missile. You know what they don't call lucky? Something that was created in a lab. It's almost like they wanted it to happen. Anyway, Samuel! Stop fucking up. Dane, where can they find this wonderful episode of Weapons of Meme Destruction?
This episode can be found at wmdpodcast.com/130. You can find any of the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. If you're a video person, you can find this on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. I don't think we need to blot out the Sam Harris part because we're really just roasting him for what he had to say about COVID. I think definitely the middle part, Dr. Wen, that will be blocked out if you're a YouTube watcher, listener, etc. So go get the full episode over on Rumble or Odyssey. But other than that, you can also find us, link up with us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. That's a members only page. You can also find us on Float. You can find us on Tribal. Please link up with us at all those places. Go to the website and buy some merch from us. Support the show with monthly memberships or a one-time donation, or just tell friends and family about Weapons of Meme Destruction. We appreciate every single one of your efforts to help us grow, to help us destroy memes, to help us keep setting people like Sam Harris in their place, and hopefully expanding the sane space such that a little bit more sanity leaks out into the broader world.
Well, here's hoping, Dane. But until then, till episode 131, you guys stay safe and stay free.